Hello, I'm cutting out some bias stripes for bias binding out of my leftover piece of organza. I normally am a little bit slapdash when it comes to cut out bias strips, especially on cotton. I just lay on my ruler and draw it out and cut it out. However, with a fluid fabric like this organza, or especially silks, that is very risky and you start getting wavy, snaky bias strips instead of beautiful pure bias strips. So today I'm going to do it the proper way I was taught many years ago, and I thought I'd share it with you. This is a great way of cutting out really straight bias binding, but it basically uses paper. We're gonna layer that paper with the fabric and then cut it all out together and keep it really stable, which means it's not very kind on your scissors, so that's why I tend to not do it unless I really need to. What we need to do is basically draw out our bias straps on the paper. So you can see I've got a really big piece of paper. It's nearly square, and what I did, I used the edge of my roll, which is I know is perfectly straight unless I'm cutting the scissors, and then I folded it at the end. So I got another perfectly straight 90-degree angle there, and I did the same here. So I've now got 3 perfectly straight, perfectly 90-degree angles, and that seems really pedantic, but if you go through the trouble of doing it, do it properly. So I'm using a super sharp pencil, unlike my normal stuff, and I'm actually going to get my pattern master. I normally love my lighter ruler, but on something like this we want the really big right angles and the 45-degree lines as well, and of course if you've got a big set square, that's perfect. So what I now know this corner is perfectly 90 degrees, perfect right angle, and I'm actually double checking because sometimes even your folding isn't 100%. So that's good. So I can draw my first line. Now you just have to decide how wide you want your bias strips to be. And what I find quite confusing at the pattern master, sometimes you have so many parallel lines, you can easily actually lose track of them. So I'm actually going to give myself a quick guideline, and I'm making mine I want some spaghetti straps, which I'm gonna make. The spaghetti straps I want 0.7 centimeters wide, which is the width of my foot, or 0.700, which means I need double that to make the outside, plus double that to make the seam allowance. So 4 times, so that I really need 3 centimeters, because then I can trim off a little bit. So I'm gonna make all my strips 3 centimeter, which will also give me, if I make bias binding again, it gives me bias binding just under 1 centimeter wide, which is perfect. Well, of course you can do whatever, but you can just mark it on quickly. And now I can't get confused, because it has happened, I'm probably not the only one, where you suddenly realize you've gone 0.5 centimeter in or out, which is why I love this ruler, because they have alternating dotted and full line, which means you always know which line you're on. So all I'm doing is moving my pattern master away. You can also at the same time check you're not going slightly off by keeping your 45-degree angle at the edge. But we're now going to line up this whole piece of paper. I've drawn half of it because that's enough for what I need. But of course, if you, for example, making plain ones, it's always good to have extra bias binding. It will keep. So we normally, of course, lay our paper on top of it. This sheer fabric, it's actually even easier just to pin it on top, because then you can control whether it's moving or not. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to line up my straight edges. Again, I've got the selvage on one side, so I know that's completely straight, and the other one I've ripped, which is, ideally I would pull a thread, but I did some tests and it's quite okay. And you can also see my selvage is actually a little bit, sometimes with silks you have to be careful, the selvage is slightly tighter, so it pulls in, just to be aware of it. I think this will be right, but some, especially silks, can have a slightly tighter woven selvage. So what we do is we line everything up, so our fabric edges are lined up with our corners and with our sides. And this is quite delicate work, and you should definitely iron your fabric. I have ironed it, but it's as soon as you take it off your ironing board, it starts moving and slightly wrinkling. So I've lined it up completely. What I now actually do is I pin each strip down. So you can see I'm doing all my pins in the same direction as well. And what I do as well with things like this is you don't want to lift up your fabric. What you do is you push down through all the layers, and then you put your thumbnail where you want your pin to come out, and then with the underside of your other thumbnail you basically push your pin completely flat until it's forced out against your thumbnail, which takes some practice. Let me know if you want a close-up shot of that one day. It also doesn't work with all fabrics, and it can become a bit painful, but it's the best way of flat pinning fabric. Of course you could use weights as well, but you would use a lot of narrow weights. But I'm going to do this on all the lines I've drawn, and then I'm just going to cut them out with both layers at the same time. All pinned down. You can see it takes ages, so if you don't have to, don't do it. Only use it for fabrics where you really need it. And you can see I try to be as flat as possible. It's got a few waves, but hopefully it'll be good enough. And now all you have to do is cut all the layers out at once. And again, you want to lift everything up as little as possible, because as soon as you lift up a fabric like this, it will move. But that's of course the great thing is by being secured on the paper, it's slightly less dangerous. But you've got a line you can follow on the really stable piece of paper, and your fabric of course is secure to that. So this is a perfect method to have in your repertoire if you're working with very tricky fabrics. And of course, most of the time you can just draw on the lines and cut it out much faster. But I think methods like that, while they take a lot of time and effort, when you need them, they are priceless, because they will get you perfectly straight, perfectly true bias binding. So I hope you found this tip helpful.